thanks for joining us. We celebrate Poetry Month with a reading from the complete poems of Emily Dickinson, edited by Thomas H. Johnson. Take Emily Dickinson out to dinner tonight, my English professor at college said, and then he recited, because I could not stop for death. My first memory of Emily Dickinson's poetry was being taught her poems in the 5th grade at Bronson, a red brick 2-story country schoolhouse in western Nebraska. Our teacher taught us the poetry of America's 2 best, most original poets, Dickinson, 1830 to 1886, and Walt Whitman. Since those early days, I've read her complete poems at least 4 times. What I love about her are her strength of line and use of metaphor. Emily Dickinson was born in Amherst, Massachusetts, where she lived most of her life. Her father was a lawyer and a congressman. She had 7 poems published in her lifetime. The late eminent literary critic Harold Bloom wrote, "A nonconformist in religion from her childhood on, Dickinson is not post-Christian like Emerson and Whitman, but rather a sect of one like Milton and Blake. Though satiric toward Calvinism, she remained its dissenting daughter. In the United States of the 21st century, she would not be considered a Christian at all. Emersonian self-reliance is her fundamental principle, and hers is a private religion of the self. She did not accept Jesus as her Redeemer. She did not believe in the resurrection, and yet Jesus to her was the exemplary sufferer who had triumphed over suffering." Emily D. began one poem, quote, "I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose," end of quote, and ended, quote, "This, the spreading wide by narrow hands, together paradise," end of quote. The magnificent readers in order of their appearance are Corinne Conley, Helen Richman, Valerie Elson, Jeanette Clough. Here's Corinne Conley.
167. Success is counted sweetest by those who ne'er succeed. To comprehend a nectar requires sorest need. Not one of all the purple host who took the flag today can tell the definition so clear of victory as he, defeated, dying, on whose forbidden ear the distant strains of triumph burst agonized and clear. 185. Faith is a fine invention when gentlemen can see, but microscopes are prudent in an emergency. 249. Wild nights, were I with thee, wild nights should be our luxury. Futile the winds to a heart in port, done with the compass, done with the chart, rowing in Eden, the sea, might I but moor tonight in thee. 254. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chilliest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. 258. There's a certain slant of light, winter afternoons, that oppresses like the heft of cathedral tombs. Heavenly hurt it gives us. We can find no scar, but internal difference where the meanings are. None may teach it, any 'tis the seal despair, an imperial affliction sent us of the air. When it comes, the landscape listens, shadows hold their breath. When it goes, 'tis like the distance on the look of death. 280. I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro kept treading, till it seemed that sense was breaking through. And when they all were seated, a service like a drum kept beating, till I thought my mind was going numb. And then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul with those same boots of lead again. Then space began to toll, as all the heavens were a bell, and being but an ear. And I and silence, some strange race, wrecked, solitary here. And then a plank in reason broke, and I dropped down and hit a world at every plunge, and finished knowing then. 287. A clock stopped, not the mantles. Geneva's farthest skill can't put the puppet bowing that just now dangled still. And awe came on the trinket. The figures hunched with pain, then quivered out of decimals into degreeless noon. It will not stir for doctors, this pendulum of snow. This shopman importunes it, while cool, concernless no. Nods from the gilded pointers, nods from the seconds slim. Decades of arrogance between the dial life and him. 288. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They'd advertise, you know. How dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog. To tell one's name the livelong June to an admiring bog. 290. Of bronze and blaze the north tonight, so adequate it forms, so preconcerted with itself, so distant to alarms, and unconcerned, so sovereign to universe or me, infects my simple spirit with taints of majesty, till I take vaster attitudes and strut upon my stem, disdaining men and oxygen for arrogance of them. My splendors are menagerie, but their competeless show will entertain the centuries when I am long ago, an islet in dishonored grass where none but beetles know. 303. The soul selects her own society, then shuts the door. To her divine majority, present no more. Unmoved, she notes the chariots pausing at her low gate. Unmoved, an emperor be kneeling upon her mat. I've known her from an ample nation choose one, then close the valves of her attention like stone. 328. A bird came down the walk. He did not know I saw. He bit an angleworm in halves and ate the fellow raw. And then he drank a dew from a convenient grass, and then hopped sideways to the wall to let a beetle pass. He glanced with rapid eyes that hurried all around. They looked like frightened beads, I thought. He stirred his velvet head like one in danger, cautious. I offered him a crumb, and he unrolled his feathers and rode him softer home. Than oars divide the oceans, two silver for a seam, or butterflies off banks of noon leap flashless as they swim. 341. After great pain, a formal feeling comes. The nerves sit ceremonious like tombs. The stiff heart questions, was it he that bore? And yesterday or centuries before? The feet mechanical go round, of ground or air or aught, a wooden way, regardless grown, a quartz contentment, like a stone. This is the hour of lead, remembered if outlived. As freezing persons recollect the snow, first chill, then stupor, then the letting go.
For 19. We grow accustomed to the dark when light is put away and when the neighbor holds the lamp to witness her goodbye. A moment, we uncertain step for newness of the night, then fit our vision to the dark and meet the road erect. And so of larger darknesses, those evenings of the brain, when not a moon disclose a sign or star come out within, the bravest grope a little and sometimes hit a tree directly in the forehead. But as they learn to see, either the darkness alters or something in the sight adjusts itself to midnight, and life steps almost straight. 435. Much madness is divinest sense to a discerning eye, much sense the starkest madness. 'Tis the majority in this, as all prevail. Assent, and you are sane. Demur, you're straightway dangerous and handled with a chain. 465. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for that last onset, when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portion of me be assignable, and then it was there interposed a fly, with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. 505. I would not paint a picture. I'd rather be the one its bright impossibility to dwell delicious on, and wonder how the fingers feel whose rare celestial stir evokes so sweet a torment, such sumptuous despair. I would not talk like cornets. I'd rather be the one raised softly to the ceilings and out and easy on through villages of ether, my self-endued balloon by but a lip of metal, the pier to my pontoon. Nor would I be a poet. Its finer own the ear, enamored, impotent, content, the license to revere. A privilege so awful, what would the dower be had I the art to stun myself with bolts of melody? 515. No crowd that has occurred exhibit, I suppose, that general attendance that resurrection does. Circumference be full. The long restricted grave assert her vital privilege, the dust connect and live on atoms. Features place all multitudes that were efface in the comparison as suns dissolve a star. Solemnity prevail, its individual doom possess each separate consciousness, august, absorbed, numb. What duplicate exist? What parallel can be of the significance of this to universe and me? 520. I started early, took my dog, and visited the sea. The mermaids in the basement came out to look at me, and frigates in the upper floor extended hempen hands, presuming me to be a mouse aground upon the sands. But no man moved me till the tide went past my simple shoe and past my apron and my belt and past my bodice too, and made as he would eat me up as wholly as a dew upon a dandelion sleeve. And then I started too, and he followed close behind. I felt his silver heel upon my ankle, then my shoes would overflow with pearl until we met the solid town. No one he seemed to know, and bowing with a mighty look at me, the sea withdrew. 536. The heart asks pleasure first, and then excuse from pain, and then those little anodynes that deaden suffering, and then to go to sleep, and then, if it should be the will of its inquisitor, the privilege to die. 561. I measure every grief I meet with narrow, probing eyes. I wonder if it weighs like mine or has an easier size. I wonder if they bore it long, or did it just begin? I could not tell the date of mine, it feels so old a pain. I wonder if it hurts to live, and if they have to try, and whether, could they choose between, it would not be to die. I note that some, gone patient long, at length renew their smile, an imitation of a light that has so little oil. I wonder if, when years have piled some thousands on the harm that hurt them early, such a lapse could give them any balm. Or would they go on aching still through centuries of nerve, enlightened to a larger pain in contrast with the love? The grieved are many, I am told. There is the various cause. Death is but one, and comes but once, and only nails the eyes. There's grief of want, and grief of cold, a sort they call despair. There's banishment from native eyes in sight of native air. And though I may not guess the kind correctly, yet to me a piercing comfort it affords in passing Calvary, to note the fashions of the cross and how they're mostly worn, still fascinated to presume that some are like my own. 569. I reckon when I count at all, first poets, then sun, then summer, then the heaven of God, and then the list is done. But looking back, the first so seems to comprehend the whole, the others look a needless show, so I write, poets all. Their summer lasts a solid year. They can afford a sun the East would deem extravagant, and if the further heaven be beautiful as they prepare for those who worship them, it is too difficult a grace to justify the dream. 585. I like to see it lap the miles and lick the valleys up and stop to feed itself at tanks, and then prodigious step around a pile of mountains and supercilious peer in shanties to the sides of roads, and then a quarry pair to fit its ribs and crawl between, complaining all the while in horrid hooting stanza, then chase itself downhill and neigh like Boanerges, then punctual as a star, stop, docile and omnipotent at its own stable door. 613. They shut me up in prose as when a little girl they put me in the closet because they liked me still. Could themselves have peeped and seen my brain go round, they might as wise have lodged a bird for treason in the pound. Himself has but to will, and easy as a star, abolish his captivity and laugh. No more have I.
The tint I cannot take is best, the color too remote that I could show it in bazaar, a guinea at a sight, the fine, impalpable arrow, the swagger on the eyes, Cleopatra's company, repeated in the sky, the moments of dominion that happen on the soul, and leave it with a discontent too exquisite to tell. The eager look on landscapes as if they just repress some secret, that the pushing like chariots in the vast, the pleading of the summer, then that other prank of snow, the cushion's mystery with tulle for fear the squirrels know. Their graspless manners mock us until the cheated eye shuts arrogantly in the grave. Another way to see. 657. I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose, more numerous of windows, superior for doors, of chambers as the cedars impregnable of eye, and for an everlasting roof, the gambrels of the sky, of visitors the fairest for occupation, this the spreading wide my narrow hands to gather paradise. 712. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held just one, ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. We passed the school where children strove at recess, In the ring we passed the friends, the fields of gazing grass. We passed setting sun, or rather he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill for only gossamer, my gown, my tippet only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then, 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. 744. Remorse is memory awake, her parties all astir, a presence of departed acts at window and at door, its past set down before the soul and lighted with a match, perusal to facilitate and help belief to stretch. Remorse is cureless, the disease not even God can heal, for 'tis his institution and the adequate of hell. 745. Renunciation is a piercing virtue, the letting go of presence for an expectation. Not now. The putting out of eyes, just sunrise, less day's great progenitor. Art the I've missed a word here. Renunciation. Renunciation is the choosing against itself, and self to justify unto itself when larger function make that appear smaller, that covered vision here. 754. My life had stood a loaded gun in corners till a day the owner passed, identified and carried me away. And now we roam the sovereign woods, and now we hunt the doe. And every time I speak for him, the mountains straight reply. And do I smile such cordial light upon the valley glow? It is a Vesuvian face had led its pleasure through. And when the night our good day done, I guard my master's hand. 'Tis better than the elder duck's deep pillow to have shared to foe of his. I'm deadly foe. None stir the second time on whom I lay a yellow eye or an emphatic thumb, though I then he may longer live. He longer must than I, for I have but the power to kill without the power to die. Number 761. From blank to blank, a threadless way, I pushed mechanic feet to stop or perish or advance, alike indifferent. If end I gained at end beyond, indefinite disclosed, I shut my eyes and groped as well 'twas lighter to be blind. On a columnar self, how ample to reply. Number 789. In tumult or extremity, how good the century. The lever cannot pry, and wedge cannot divide conviction. That granitic base, though none beyond our side, suffice us for a crowd outside ourselves and rectitude, and that assembly not far off from furthest spirit, God. 812. A light exists in spring, not present on the year at any other period when March is scarcely here. A color stands abroad on solitary fields that science cannot overtake, but human nature feels. It waits upon the lawn, it shows the furthest tree. Upon the furthest slope, you know, it almost speaks to you. Then as horizons steep or noons report away, without the formula of sound it passes, and we stay, a quality of loss affecting our content. as trade had suddenly encroached upon a sacrament. 986. A narrow fellow in the grass occasionally rides. You may have met him. Did you not? His notice sudden is. The grass divides us with a comb. A spotted shaft is seen, and then it closes at your feet and opens further on. He likes a bogey acre, a floor too cool for corn, yet when a boy and barefoot, I more than once at noon have passed, I thought of whiplash, unbraiding the sun. When stooping to secure it, it wrinkled and it was gone. Several of nature's people I know, and they know me, and I feel for them a transport of cordiality, but never met this fellow, attended or alone, without a tighter breathing and zero at the bone. 1068. Further in summer than the birds pathetic from the grass, a minor nation celebrates its unobtrusive mass. No ordinance be seen, so gradual the grace. A pensive custom it becomes enlarging loneliness. Antiquest felt at noon, when August burning low arose the special centicle, proposed to typify. Remit as yet no grace, no furrow on the glow, yet a druidic difference enhances nature now. The bustle in a house the morning after death is solemnest of industries enacted upon earth, the sweeping up the heart and putting love away we should not want to use again until eternity. Thank you.
1129. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies. Too bright for our infirm delight, the truth's superb surprise. As lightning to the children eased with explanation kind, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. 1153. Through what transports of patience I reached the stolid bliss to breathe my blank without thee. Attest me this and this. By that bleak exaltation I won as near as this thy privilege of dying. Abbreviate me this. 1260. Because that you are going and never coming back, and I, however absolute, may overlook your track. Because that death is final, however first it be, this instant be suspended above mortality. Significance that each has lived the other to detect. Discovery not God himself could now annihilate. Eternity, presumption, the instant I perceive that you, who were existence, forgot yourself to live. The life that is will then have been a thing I never knew, a paradise fictitious until the realm of you. The life that is to be, to me, a residence too plain, unless in my Redeemer's face, unless in my Redeemer's face I recognize your own. Of immortality, who doubts he may exchange with me, curtailed by your obscuring face of everything but he. Of heaven and hell I also yield the right to reprehend to whoso would commute this face for his less priceless friend. If God is love, as he admits, admits we think that me must be. Because he is a jealous God, he tells us certainly if all is possible with him, as he besides concedes, he will refund us finally our confiscated gods. 1545. The Bible is an antique volume written by faded men at the suggestion of holy scepters. Subjects: Bethlehem, Eden the ancient homestead, Satan the brigadier, Judas the great defaulter, David the troubadour, sin, a distinguished precipice others must resist. Boys that believe are very lonesome. Other boys are lost. Had but the tale a warbling teller, all the boys would come. Orpheus's sermon captivated, it did not condemn. 1651. A word made flesh is seldom, and tremblingly partook, nor then perhaps reported. But have I not mistook? Each one of us has tasted with ecstasies of stealth the very food debated to our specific strength. A word that breathes distinctly has not the power to die. Cohesive as the spirit, it may expire. If he made flesh and dwelt upon us, could condescension be like this consent of language, this loved philology? 1670. In winter in my room, I came upon a worm, pink, lank, and warm. But as he was a worm, and worms presume, not quite with him at home, secured him by a string to something neighboring, and went along. A trifle afterward, a thing occurred, I'd not believe it if I heard, but state with creeping blood. A snake with mottles rare surveyed my chamber floor, in feature as the worm before, but ringed with power. The very string with which I tied him to when he was mean and low, that string was there. I shrank. How fair you are, propitiation's claw. Afraid, he hissed, of me, no cordiality. He fathomed me, then to a rhythm slim, secreted in his form, as patterns swim, projected him. That time I flew away, both eyes his way, lest he pursue, nor ever ceased to run, till in a distant town, towns on from mine, I set me down. This was a dream. 1712. A pit, but heaven over it, and heaven beside, and heaven abroad, and yet a pit with heaven over it. To stir would be to slip, to look would be to drop, to dream, to sap the prop that holds my chances up. Ah, pit with heaven over it. The depth is all my thought. I dare not ask my feet. 'Twould start us where we sit, so straight you'd scarce suspect it was a pit, with fathoms under it, its circuit just the same. Seed, summer, tomb. Whose doom to whom? 1714. By departing light we see acuter, quite, than by a wick that stays. There's something in the flight that clarifies the sight, and decks the rays. 1732. My life closed twice before its close, yet it yet remains to see if immortality unveil a third event to me, so huge, so hopeless to conceive, as these that twice befell. Parting is all we know of heaven and all we need of hell. No man, 1733. No man saw all, nor to his house admitted he a man, though by his awful residence has human nature been, not deeming of this dread abode till laboring to flee, a grasp at comprehension laid, detained vitality. Returning is a different route. The spirit could not show, for breathing is the only work to be enacted now. I am not consumed, old Moses wrote, yet saw him face to face. That very physiognomy, I am convinced, was this. 1763. Fame is a bee. It has a song. It has a sting. Too, it has a wing.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Valerie, Corinne, Helen. What a marvelous reading. I mean, she has such depth and such scope. Let's just talk about it a little bit. We have about 9 minutes left. Why don't we start in the order, start at the beginning with Corinne and just go down the order and listen to each one of you what you would like to say about Emily Dickinson's poetry. Corinne?
I'd say I was a little overwhelmed by her poetry. We read a lot of it today, and I've been reading a lot of it working up to this. And it amazes me. I mean, they always say what a solitary person she was. She would have had to have been, because she must have just thought everything poetically. And because it's all, it's all about looking at everything that she looked at, everything that she sees. She seems to put it all into poetry. So yes, her scope is amazing, because she takes on such serious subjects, and it's not just like pretty flowers. Everything is like a deep emotion or a conviction of some sort. Anyway, I'd be interested to hear what other people, how she got to them. Yes.
Helen?
Yes, I was very, very moved, particularly by a poem that Corinne read called "A Bird Walked Down." What was it called? A bird
Walk down the walk.
A bird came down the walk. I'll tell you, lately it's like birds come to me, and I don't know if any of you a week ago last Wednesday saw here on our campus a white crane, a beautiful, elegant, graceful white crane outside my cottage that stayed there for over an hour. And so when I see that Emily Dickinson knows how to apply a humanity to an animal, a bird, I got very moved, because that's what I started to do. I was crying and talking to that bird for about an hour. So that poem in particular was like magic. And I enjoyed very much the fact that Emily Dickinson does write on many different subjects. And yes, I agree with Corinne. She's such a poet that she sees all of the world in poetry. So yes, it was fun to work on her.
Thank you, Helen. Is Valerie still with us?
I am.
Yes. What would you like to say about Emily Dickinson's poetry, Valerie?
Well, I was especially interested in the difference between the 1800s and the 1900s. It was a total change in style, slowly but surely. Did you notice that?
Well, she was certainly different from any other poet that I can think of, but I see what you're talking about. Anything else, Val?
Well, I just want to thank all the ladies.
Thank you very much. Jeanette Clough?
Wow. Well, my appreciation for Emily Dickinson has expanded over the years. At first, she mostly puzzled me because they seemed just so cryptic. But as I read them, and I think you referred to this in your introduction, I realized much more how the depth of her metaphor, and that once you get under what the literal is into the metaphor, it can be really a radical content once you discern that there is that double layer going on, because she fuses them so closely. It can be read on, if not one, several levels. But I mean, that's all the richer. We talk about extended metaphor, but she really did it in very short amount of time and a short number of lines. And it's true, she writes about everything. And there's very few things that are limited in time that she brings up. So it becomes remarkably relevant and contemporary because she does not use any kind of language that refers to, say, the technology of the day or something particularly like that. So,
well, the other thing which I think about sometimes is most poets, you can see their influences. You can look at Whitman, you can see the biblical, the long line, his cadences. With Emily Dickinson, it's almost like she just sprouted without a predecessor. For me, her cadences were listening to all of your great readings really mesmerized me. And I found in the readings and in the poetry, there was a clarity, and there was also a finality, but also an expansion. And there was also a gloriousness and a brightness and a vitality, a playfulness, a sagacity. And there were so many variations of emotions. It was like a beautiful concert for me at times, obviously Ella Jake. And the one poem which I wanted to point out, which means a lot to me, is one that Jeanette read, 1714, where she says, by a departing light, we see a cuter white. And then she goes on at the end and said, there's something in the flight that clarifies the sight. And I think that may be true. Obviously, I've never been in that position of dying, but as we get close to death, you look at somebody who's dying, and sometimes you see a youthful beauty come out of them. It's also almost like a distillation of beauty that you see in those last moments, at least from my point of view. But I love her poetry, and this was really, I was thinking about, we did about, 45 or 45 poems, which is quite a bit to fit within an hour. And all of you just really picked up the pace and just really exceeded everything that was just right there. And I see Jennifer's back on the screen, and we're almost through here. I want to just thank you all for all of your fabulous work. And Jennifer, what would you like to say to close the show?
Well, I was wondering if anyone had seen the narrative for Emily Dickinson that was done recently with Haley Steinfeld in the lead role of Emily.
Wow.
I didn't see that, but I saw a film called A Quiet Life by Terrence Davies. one of my favorite English directors. It was very austere. It showed how she was living under the patriarchy, and it also showed the domesticity, but then the big tall windows and how she was almost around inside the house, how she could see out those great lighted windows. But I didn't see the one you were discussing, Jennifer.
So let me see if I can get my hands on some screener versions of that. I want to say may have been from last year, but Haley Steinfeld does a beautiful turn as Emily, and it's a very different look at what her life was like. Not necessarily kind of the bedbound recluse that we believe her to be. Still giving hints to that, but this is a little bit more in her earlier life. It was delightful to have Valerie come to the stage. We are excited about more and more opportunity to have face-to-face collaborations, and the celebration of Emily Dickinson is a perfect way to kick off Poetry Month. And I'm really excited about everything that Harry has lined up. Do you want to give us a little bit of a preview for that? We are very close to Friends of Bob. Bob Beecher is going to interview Pete Hammond. I'm waiting for Pete to show up, and Bob's finishing up a phone call. So, Harry, tell us what's on tap for the next couple of weeks.
Well, I agree with you.
And I want to say thank you to Valerie and Jeanette and Helen and Corinne for always doing such a beautiful job expressing this poetry.
I agree. Well, this was a great way to start off Poetry Month. Next Friday, we have Jim Daniels, who is a professor of creative writing at Carnegie Mellon. He came from Detroit. He's reading with one of his students many years ago, John Fines. The following week, we have Jack Hirschman, an LA guy, ended up living in the Bay Area, poet laureate, 2009 to 2012 with Michael C. Ford. And the following Friday, we have the newly named poet laureate of Los Angeles, Lynn Thompson, and she'll be reading with Michael Lally. And then finally, the last Friday of this month, we have 4 members of the staff of MPTF, including its leader, Bob Beecher, and Jennifer Clymer, the director of media for MPTF, along with a woman who was on the show before us, Courtney Bailey and Sharon Seaford. So that's it. It's a wonderful month. Thank you very much for all of you, and thanks to you, Jennifer, once again.